The scent of lavender and lye hung thick in the air as Lydia Turner wiped sweat from her brow, the Montana summer heat making her small workshop feel like an oven even with both windows thrown wide open. She had been stirring the soap mixture for the better part of an hour, her arms aching but her resolve unwavering as she thought about the families struck down by illness on the outskirts of Butte. The year was 1873, and disease swept through mining camps and settlements with a cruel regularity that broke her heart every time she heard about another child or elderly person falling sick. Lydia had learned soap making from her mother back in Ohio, before heading west with her father to start fresh after her mother's death 3 years ago. Her father had caught gold fever like so many others, but his heart had given out within the first year of hard mining work. At 23 years old, Lydia found herself alone in a rough mining town, but she had her skill and her determination. She turned their small wooden house at the edge of town into both her home and workshop, spending long hours crafting bars of soap that she sold to the local mercantile and to families who could afford to pay for quality goods. But the families who needed soap most desperately were the ones who could not afford it. Lydia had seen the connection between cleanliness and health during a particularly bad outbreak of fever the previous winter. The families who maintained better hygiene seemed to fare better, lose fewer members to the sickness that ravaged the poorest sections of town. She had started donating bars then, loading up her small cart and making deliveries to the sick and struggling, accepting nothing but grateful smiles and occasional offerings of vegetables or bread. Today's batch was special. She had added extra herbs that Dr. Morrison had mentioned might help with healing skin ailments and preventing infection. The old physician had been kind enough to share his knowledge with her, recognizing that her work complemented his own efforts to keep Butte's growing population healthy. The town had swelled to nearly 3,000 souls, most of them men seeking fortune in the copper and silver mines that honeycombed the hills around them. As she poured the mixture into wooden molds lined with cloth, Lydia heard a commotion outside. Horses whinnied and men shouted, their voices carrying that particular edge of urgency that meant trouble. She wiped her hands on her apron and hurried to the front window, peering out to see a group of dusty cowboys riding hard down the main street. One of them was slumped forward in his saddle, clearly injured or ill. Lydia did not hesitate. She grabbed her shawl and rushed outside, flagging down the riders as they approached. The lead cowboy, a grizzled man with a gray beard, pulled up his mount and tipped his hat to her. "Miss, we need the doctor. Our friend Yates took sick 3 days ago and he has gotten worse. Fever and chills, something fierce." "Dr. Morrison is out at the Hendricks place delivering a baby," Lydia said, already moving toward the sick man. "Bring him inside." "I can help until the doctor returns." The cowboys exchanged glances, clearly uncertain about trusting their companion to a young woman, but the sick man groaned and nearly fell from his saddle. That decided matters. 2 of them dismounted and carefully lifted their friend down, carrying him toward Lydia's door as she held it open wide. "Put him on the cot in the back room," she instructed, leading them through her tidy front room and workshop to the small space she kept for exactly these situations. It was not the first time someone had needed urgent care when the doctor was unavailable. They laid him down gently, and Lydia got her first good look at the patient. Despite his pallor and the sweat soaking his clothes, she could see he was a young man, probably not much older than herself. Dark hair stuck to his forehead and his breathing came shallow and quick. His face had good bones, strong features that spoke of determination and character, though right now those features were twisted in discomfort. "What is your friend's name?" she asked as she rolled up her sleeves. "Yates Young, miss. He works the Young ranch down in the valley. We were driving cattle north when he took sick. How long has he been like this? Started with a cough 3 days back. Yesterday the fever came on. Today he could barely stay on his horse. Lydia placed her hand on Yates's forehead and felt the burning heat radiating from his skin. She had seen this pattern before. Likely pneumonia or a similar lung affliction, made worse by days of riding in all weather and sleeping on the hard ground. "I will do what I can," she said. "You men should go on and complete your business. He needs rest and careful tending, not to be jostled on a horse. Come back in a few days." The gray-bearded cowboy frowned. "We cannot just leave him with a stranger, miss. No offense meant, but we do not know you." "My name is Lydia Turner. I have lived in Butte for 3 years. Ask anyone in town and they will vouch for me. Your friend needs clean surroundings, fluids, and medicine. I can provide all of that. What I cannot do is help him if he is bouncing around in a saddle." She met the man's eyes steadily, letting him see her conviction. After a long moment, he nodded. "We will be back in 4 days, Miss Turner. Yates is like a son to me, so you take good care of him." "I will do my very best. I promise you that." The cowboys filed out, their spurs jingling and their voices low as they discussed this unexpected development. Lydia barely noticed them leaving. She was already moving, gathering supplies and mentally reviewing everything Dr. Morrison had taught her about treating lung ailments. She started by stripping off Yates's sweat-soaked shirt and washing him with cool water to bring down the fever. His torso was lean and muscled from hard work, marked with old scars that told stories of a rough life. She tried not to think about the impropriety of the situation. In emergencies, propriety took a distant second place to saving lives. Once she had him clean and dressed in one of her father's old nightshirts that she had kept. She propped him up with pillows to help his breathing and spooned lukewarm broth between his cracked lips. He was barely conscious, muttering incoherently, but his body accepted the liquid without choking. That was a good sign. For the next 2 days, Lydia barely left Yates's side. She sponged him with cool water when the fever spiked, forced fluids down his throat, and applied poultices to his chest made from herbs Dr. Morrison had recommended. She boiled water constantly, filling the small room with steam to ease his labored breathing. At night, she dozed in a chair beside his cot, waking at every sound to check on him. On the 3rd morning, his fever finally broke. Lydia woke from an uneasy sleep to find Yates's eyes open, staring at the ceiling with a confused expression. When he turned his head and saw her, those eyes widened. They were the color of storm clouds, gray with hints of blue. "Where am I?" His voice came out as a hoarse rasp. "In Butte, Montana. You are in my home. You were very sick." Lydia stood and poured fresh water from the pitcher, bringing it to him. "Drink this slowly." He struggled to sit up and she helped him, arranging the pillows behind his back. His hand trembled as he took the cup, but he managed to drink without spilling. The simple act seemed to exhaust him. "I do not remember much," he said after a moment. "We were moving cattle. I felt poorly but figured I could push through." He looked at her with those striking eyes. "You have been caring for me." "Yes. Your friends brought you here 4 days ago. Dr. Morrison has been checking on you as well, but I have done most of the nursing." 4 days. He looked shocked. "I have been here 4 days. You were very ill. Pneumonia, the doctor thinks. You are not out of danger yet, but the fever breaking is a good sign." Yates studied her face and Lydia felt suddenly self-conscious. She knew she looked exhausted, her blonde hair coming loose from its pins and dark circles under her green eyes. She had not taken time for her usual careful grooming while fighting to keep him alive. "You are the soap maker," he said suddenly. "I have heard people talk about you in town. You give soap to folks who cannot pay." Lydia felt her cheeks warm. "I do what I can. Cleanliness prevents sickness. You also apparently take in sick cowboys and nurse them back to health." There was something in his voice, a warmth that had not been there initially. "I am in your debt, Miss Turner, Lydia Turner, and you owe me nothing. Anyone would have done the same. That is not true, and we both know it." He tried to shift position and winced, his hand going to his ribs. "How much do I owe you for room and board, for medicine?" "Nothing." "Please do not insult me by offering payment for basic Christian charity. It is more than charity to spend 4 days caring for a stranger." Yates set the cup down carefully on the small table beside the cot. "You have a business to run. I have taken you away from your work." "My work will be there when I return to it. Human life is more important than soap." Lydia picked up the cup and moved to the doorway. "I will make you some breakfast. You need to eat to regain your strength. Broth and soft bread to start." She left before he could argue further, grateful for the excuse to escape those intense gray eyes. Something about the way Yates Young looked at her made her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with the exertion of nursing him. She told herself it was simply exhaustion and relief that her patient was recovering. Over the next 3 days, Yates improved rapidly. His appetite returned, and with it his strength, though Lydia was strict about keeping him in bed and resting. Dr. Morrison visited daily and pronounced himself impressed with both her nursing skills and Yates's constitution. "You have got the lungs of a bull," the old doctor told Yates with a chuckle. "Most men would have died from what you had. But you are not to go back to ranch work for at least 2 weeks. Light activity only, and stay out of bad weather." 2 weeks? Yates looked horrified. "Doc, I cannot sit idle for 2 weeks. The ranch needs me." "The ranch will survive. You will not if you push yourself too soon and relapse." Dr. Morrison turned to Lydia. "Can he stay here while he recovers? I hate to impose on you further, but I do not trust him to rest properly if he goes back to the bunkhouse." Lydia hesitated. Having Yates under her roof for a few more days when he was sick was one thing. Having a healthy young man living in her house was quite another. The gossips in town would have a field day with it. "I can pay," Yates said quickly. "Room and board, proper rates, and I can help with work around the place. I am not completely useless." "You are supposed to be resting," Lydia reminded him, but she found herself nodding. "You can stay, but only if you follow doctor's orders, and I will accept payment for meals but not for the room." "Thank you." The gratitude in Yates's voice was genuine, and when their eyes met, Lydia felt that strange flutter again. After Dr. Morrison left, an awkward silence fell between them. Yates was now dressed in his own clothes, which Lydia had washed and mended where the fabric had torn. He sat in her father's old chair by the window, looking out at the bustling street of Butte. The town never truly slept, with miners working in shifts and businesses staying open to serve them at all hours. "Tell me about the soap making," Yates said eventually. "How did you learn?" Lydia looked up from the mending in her lap, surprised by the question. Most men did not care about such domestic matters. "My mother taught me back in Ohio. She learned from her mother. It has been passed down through the women in my family for generations." "It seems like difficult work." "It can be. The lye is dangerous if you are not careful, and the proportions have to be exact, but there is something satisfying about it. Taking simple ingredients and creating something useful, something that helps people." She paused, needle poised over the shirt she was repairing. "After my mother died and my father brought me west, it was my connection to her. Every batch I make, I remember her hands showing me how to stir, her voice explaining the process. She would be proud of you, the way you help people." "I hope so." Lydia bent back to her mending, uncomfortable with the emotion thickening her throat. They fell into a companionable silence after that, and as the afternoon wore on, Lydia found herself stealing glances at her unexpected houseguest. Yates was handsome. There was no denying that. But more than his looks, there was something solid about him, a quiet strength that had nothing to do with physical power. When he asked questions, he really listened to her answers. When she brought him tea or food, he thanked her sincerely, as if she had given him something precious rather than just performing common courtesy. That evening, Lydia was preparing supper when there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Sarah Chen, who ran the boarding house 2 streets over. Sarah was one of the few women in Butte that Lydia considered a true friend. "I heard you have a man living here," Sarah said without preamble, her dark eyes sparkling with curiosity. "The whole town is talking about it." Lydia sighed. "He was ill. I was caring for him. Dr. Morrison asked him to stay until he is fully recovered. May I meet this mysterious patient?" Sarah peered past Lydia toward the sitting room where Yates was visible in the chair by the window. "Come in." Lydia stood aside, knowing there was no point in trying to hide the situation. Better to be open about it and let people see there was nothing improper happening. She made introductions, and Sarah chatted easily with Yates while Lydia finished preparing the meal. When she called them to the table, Sarah declined to stay but invited them both to Sunday dinner at her boarding house. "Plenty of people there, very proper. It will help quiet the gossips if they see you two in public settings with chaperones," Sarah said wisely. "Trust me on this, Lydia. I know how this town works." After Sarah left, Lydia and Yates ate in silence for a few minutes before he spoke. "I am sorry if my being here causes problems for your reputation. You have nothing to apologize for. You were ill, but Sarah is right that we need to be careful about appearances." Lydia pushed food around on her plate. People love to talk, especially about unmarried women. "You never married?" The question was casual, but Lydia caught genuine interest in his tone. "There has not been anyone I wanted to marry, and I am too independent for most men's tastes. They want wives who will obey without question, who will make themselves small and quiet." She met his eyes across the table. "I am neither small nor quiet when it comes to things I care about." I noticed. There was something that might have been admiration in his expression. "When you ordered those cowboys around, including men twice your size, they listened. That takes a special kind of strength or stubbornness, depending on who you ask. I would call it conviction." Yates leaned back in his chair. "You know what you believe in and you act on it. That is rare. Most people just go along with whatever is easiest." Lydia felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the hot meal. When was the last time someone had truly seen her, understood her? "What about you? Why are you not married? A ranch hand with steady work must have prospects." "It is my ranch, actually, or it will be someday. My father started it 20 years ago, built it up from nothing. I have been working alongside him since I was old enough to sit a horse. He is getting older now, slowing down. In a few years it will pass to me." Yates turned his cup in his hands, studying the contents. "As for marriage, I have been too busy building the ranch, and like you, I have not met anyone who made me want to change my bachelor ways." The unspoken, until now, hung in the air between them, though neither voiced it. But Lydia heard it all the same, felt it in the way Yates looked at her, in the sudden acceleration of her own heartbeat. The next few days established a rhythm to their unusual household. Lydia rose early to work on her soap-making, and Yates would appear in the workshop doorway to watch her work, asking questions and showing genuine interest in the craft. He insisted on helping with tasks that did not require much physical exertion, and she found herself accepting his assistance despite her initial protests. He had a way of making even mundane chores feel pleasant. When they worked together washing the equipment or cutting herbs from her small garden, Their conversation flowed easily. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about his dreams of expanding the herd and making the Young ranch one of the most successful in Montana. She shared stories about Ohio, about her mother's wisdom and her father's restless spirit that had ultimately led to his death. "Do you regret coming west?" Yates asked one afternoon as they sat shelling peas on the back porch. Lydia considered the question. "Sometimes. I miss my mother and I wish my father had lived to see me settled and happy. But I also cannot imagine going back to Ohio now. For all its roughness, there is a freedom here that did not exist back east. I run my own business, support myself, make my own choices. If I had stayed, I would have been pressured to marry whoever would have me, to live according to someone else's rules. Your independence is one of the things I admire most about you." Yates's voice was quiet, serious. "You could have given up after your father died. Gone back to family if you have any, or married for security. Instead, you chose the harder path. You built something of your own." "It has not been easy," Lydia admitted. "There were times, especially that first winter alone, when I was not sure I would make it, but I am stubborn." "No, you are strong. There is a difference." Their eyes met and held. Lydia felt her breath catch at the intensity of his gaze. Something was growing between them, something that both thrilled and terrified her. She barely knew this man, yet she felt more connected to him than to people she had known for years. On Sunday, they attended the dinner at Sarah's boarding house as planned. The other guests included several respectable families and a few single minors Sarah was trying to match with suitable wives. The atmosphere was lively and proper, with good food and pleasant conversation. Lydia watched how Yates interacted with the other guests, noting his easy manners and genuine interest in people. He was comfortable with the rough miners and equally at ease with the more refined families, adapting his manner without seeming false. After dinner, when the group had moved to the parlor for coffee and dessert, old Mrs. Patterson cornered Lydia. The elderly widow was known as one of the biggest gossips in Butte, but she was also surprisingly kind-hearted. "That young man watches you like you hung the moon," Mrs. Patterson said quietly, her eyes twinkling. "I have seen many a couple fall in love, and you two have that look about you." "We barely know each other," Lydia protested, but her cheeks warmed. "Sometimes the heart knows faster than the head catches up. My late husband proposed after knowing me for 2 weeks. We had 40 happy years together before the Lord took him home." Mrs. Patterson patted Lydia's hand. "Do not be afraid of happiness when it comes along, dear. Life is too short and uncertain, especially out here." As the evening wound down and Lydia and Yates walked back to her house through the lamp-lit streets, she found herself thinking about Mrs. Patterson's words. Could you really know after such a short time? Was it possible to build something lasting on such a brief acquaintance? "You are quiet," Yates observed. "Did someone say something that upset you?" "No, just thinking." Lydia pulled her shawl tighter against the cooling evening air. Fall was coming, and with it, the harsh Montana winter. "Mrs. Patterson mentioned that you watch me." She had not meant to say that, but the words slipped out before she could stop them. Yates was quiet for several paces before responding. "I do watch you. I cannot help it." His voice was low, honest. "Lydia, I know this is sudden. I know we have not known each other long, but these past days with you have been the happiest I can remember. You are unlike any woman I have ever met. You are brilliant and kind and strong. You fight for what you believe in. You see people as people, not as their bank accounts or social standing. And when I think about leaving, about going back to the ranch and not seeing you every day, it feels wrong." They had reached her front door. Lydia turned to face him, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he must hear it. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I think I am falling in love with you." Yates reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused from work. "I am saying that I want to court you properly if you will allow it. I want to get to know you better, and I want you to know me. I want to see where this leads." Lydia looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face. In the lamplight, his features were softer, more vulnerable than she had seen them. This was not a casual flirtation. He was offering her something real, something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "I would like that," she said softly. "I would like that very much." The smile that spread across Yates's face transformed him. He brought her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, the gesture both old-fashioned and deeply romantic. "Thank you." That night, Lydia lay in her bed unable to sleep, replaying every moment of the evening. She had never felt this way before, this mixture of excitement and nervousness and pure joy. Was it too fast? Probably. Was it risky? Certainly. But Mrs. Patterson's words echoed in her mind. Do not be afraid of happiness when it comes along. The next morning, Yates's friends returned as promised. The gray-bearded cowboy, whose name was Thomas, looked shocked and pleased to find Yates up and about, clearly on the mend. "Miss Turner, you are a miracle worker," Thomas declared, pumping Lydia's hand enthusiastically. "Yates looks better than he has in months." "She is remarkable," Yates agreed, his eyes on Lydia in a way that made the other cowboys exchange knowing looks. "Well, we have finished our business here and need to get back to the ranch. Your pa is worried about you, Yates. We sent word you were sick but recovering." Thomas turned his hat in his hands. "You fit to ride." "The doctor said light activity only for another week," Lydia interjected before Yates could answer. "Riding all day on the trail is not light activity." "She is right," Yates said reluctantly. "Tell Pa I will be home by the end of the week. Miss Turner has graciously agreed to let me stay until the doctor clears me for work." After the cowboys left, promising to relay Yates's message, an awkward tension filled the house. They were alone again, but everything felt different now after last night's conversation. Lydia threw herself into her work, trying to ignore the butterflies in her stomach every time Yates came near. Around midday, Dr. Morrison arrived for his daily checkup. After examining Yates and declaring him much improved, the doctor gave his permission for light riding by the end of the week. But no cattle driving, no roping, nothing strenuous for at least another 10 days, Dr. Morrison warned. "You can ride home, you can walk around, you can do light chores. But if you push too hard, too fast, you will relapse. Pneumonia is not something to take lightly." After the doctor left, Yates found Lydia in her workshop stirring a new batch of soap. She had a smudge of ash on her cheek and several strands of hair had escaped her bun, but to Yates, she had never looked more beautiful. "I will need to leave in 3 days," he said quietly. Lydia's hand stilled on the stirring rod. "I know, but I want to come back, to visit, to court you properly." He moved closer, careful not to disturb her work. "The ranch is 2 hours' ride from here. I could come into town once a week, maybe twice if things are not too busy." "I would like that." Lydia resumed stirring, needing something to do with her hands. "But Yates, we should be practical. You have responsibilities at the ranch. I have my business here. How would this work?" "I do not have all the answers yet, but I know I want to try." He reached out and gently wiped the ash from her cheek, his touch lingering. "You are worth trying for." The next 3 days passed too quickly. Yates continued to help around the house and workshop, and they talked for hours about everything and nothing. Lydia learned about his childhood, about the mother he had lost when he was 12, about his father's determination to build something lasting in the Montana wilderness. Yates learned about Lydia's dreams of expanding her soap business, perhaps hiring other women to help and teaching them the craft. She wanted to do more than just make soap. She wanted to create opportunities for women who, like her, found themselves alone in a harsh world. "You think big," Yates said admiringly. "Most people are content with small, safe dreams." "Safe dreams do not change anything," Lydia replied. "And there is so much that needs changing." On Yates's last evening, Lydia prepared a special dinner. She had splurged on a good cut of beef from the butcher and made bread from her carefully hoarded white flour. They ate by candlelight, the mood bittersweet. "I will miss this," Yates said quietly. "These quiet evenings talking with you, your company. I will miss you too." Lydia was surprised by how much she meant it. In less than 2 weeks, Yates Young had become a central part of her life. The house would feel empty without him. After dinner, they sat on the front porch in the cooling evening air. Butt streets were busy as always, but they felt separate from the noise and activity, cocooned in their own small world. "Lydia." Yates took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I want you to know that this is not a passing fancy for me. What I feel for you is real, and I am a patient man. I will court you for as long as it takes, prove to you that we can make this work. You do not have to prove anything to me. I already know you are a good man." Lydia squeezed his hand. "But I appreciate that you are willing to take time, do this properly. I have always believed that anything worth having is worth working for." "Then we agree." Yates lifted her hand and kissed it again, that gentle gesture that made her heart race. "I will come back this Saturday. We can spend the day together. Let me take you to dinner somewhere nice." "I would like that very much." They sat in comfortable silence after that, hands linked, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Lydia committed every detail to memory, knowing it would have to sustain her through the days until she saw him again. The next morning, Yates's departure happened quickly. His horse had been stabled at the livery, and Thomas had left Yates's saddle and belongings there when the other cowboys left. Lydia walked with him to collect his things, neither of them saying much. What was there to say that had not already been said? At the stable, Yates took his time checking his gear and saddling his horse. Lydia recognized the delay for what it was and loved him a little more for it. Finally, there was nothing left to check, no reason to postpone further. "Saturday," Yates said, looking down at her from his saddle. "I will be here by noon. I will be watching for you." Lydia shaded her eyes against the morning sun to see his face clearly. "Ride safe, Yates Young." "Take care of yourself, Lydia Turner." He touched his hat brim in farewell, then turned his horse toward the road leading south out of town. Lydia watched until he disappeared from sight, then slowly walked back to her house. It felt emptier than it ever had before, even in those dark days right after her father died. She threw herself into work, making batch after batch of soap, filling orders she had neglected during Yates's illness and recovery. That afternoon, she loaded her cart with donated bars and made her rounds to the families struggling with sickness. The Henderson family on the east side had 3 children down with fever. Mrs. Miller's baby had developed a terrible rash. Old Mr. Thompson's leg wound was not healing properly. Lydia brought soap and advice, clean bandages and a listening ear. She stayed with Mrs. Henderson long enough to show her how to make a poultice that might help the children. She taught Mrs. Miller about boiling water and keeping things clean around the baby. She changed Mr. Thompson's dressing and left him a special bar made with healing herbs. By the time she returned home, the sun was setting and she was exhausted. But it was a good exhaustion, the kind that came from useful work. As she cleaned her equipment and prepared for the next day, she thought about Yates. Was he home safe? What was he doing now? Did he miss her as much as she missed him? The next few days crawled by. Lydia filled them with work, but her mind kept drifting to Saturday. Sarah visited on Thursday and immediately noticed the distraction. "You have got it bad," Sarah said, laughing. "I have never seen you like this. It is rather sweet, actually." "Is it always like this?" Lydia asked. "This constant thinking about someone, wondering what they are doing, counting the hours until you see them again. When it is real, yes. When it is the right person." Sarah's expression softened. "I am happy for you, Lydia. You deserve someone who sees how special you are." Saturday finally arrived. Lydia woke early and spent more time than usual on her appearance, choosing her best day dress in deep green that Sarah said brought out her eyes. She pinned her hair carefully and even added a touch of rose water to her wrists. Then she felt silly for being so vain and nearly changed into her work clothes. But no, Yates was taking her somewhere nice. She should look nice too. By 11 o'clock, she was pacing. By 11:30, she was standing on the porch watching the road. At precisely noon, she spotted a rider approaching and her heart leaped. Yates sat straight in his saddle, clearly much healthier than when she had last seen him. He had dressed up too, she noticed. Clean shirt, vest, his dark hair neat under his hat. "Hello," he said, dismounting and tying his horse to her fence rail. "You look beautiful." "Thank you, you look well. How are you feeling? Strong enough to sweep you off your feet?" He grinned at her expression. "Too much, perhaps a little." But she was smiling too, ridiculously happy just to see him. They went to the hotel restaurant, the nicest establishment in Butte. Over steak and potatoes, they caught each other up on the past week. Yates talked about his father's relief at seeing him healthy, about catching up on ranch work. Lydia described her rounds with the donated soap, the families she had helped. "You should charge them something," Yates said. "Even a penny. You cannot support yourself on charity alone." "I charge plenty of people full price, the ones who can afford it anyway. These families genuinely have nothing. Would you have me turn away sick children because their parents cannot pay? No, of course not, but I worry about you. Are you making enough to live on?" The concern in his voice touched her. "I do well enough. I am not getting rich, but I keep myself fed and sheltered. That is more than many can say." After dinner, they walked along Butte's Main Street, looking in shop windows and watching the constant activity of the mining town. Yates told her funny stories about life on the ranch, about stubborn cattle and skittish horses. Lydia found herself laughing more than she had in months, maybe years. As the afternoon waned, they ended up back at her house, sitting on the porch as they had on his last night there. But this time felt different, more comfortable, less desperate. They had made it through the first week apart, and here they were again. It felt like proof that this could work. "I want to meet your father," Lydia said suddenly. "If we are courting, I should meet your family." Yates looked surprised but pleased. "Are you sure? The ranch is not fancy, we live simply." "I am not looking for fancy. I want to see where you come from, meet the man who raised you. Then next Saturday, if the weather holds, I will take you out to the ranch. We can make a day of it." He took her hand, that gesture already becoming familiar, already feeling right. "Fair warning, Pa can be gruff, but he has a good heart. I am not worried." And she was not. If Yates was anything to judge by, his father must be a good man. They said goodbye as the sun set, Yates needing to start the ride back before full dark. Lydia watched him go again, but this time it was easier. They had a plan, a next meeting already scheduled. This was not goodbye, just see you soon. The pattern continued through September into October. Every Saturday, Yates would ride into Butte, and they would spend the day together. Sometimes they went to church services in the morning, then dinner at the hotel. Other times they would pack a picnic and ride out to a pretty spot Yates knew, spending hours talking and dreaming together. On the Saturday Lydia met his father. The old rancher had been gruff as promised, but also welcoming in his rough way. "So you are the woman who saved my boy's life," Mr. Young said, looking Lydia up and down with sharp eyes. "He has not stopped talking about you since he got home." "Pa," Yates protested, but his father ignored him. "You make good soap, girl." "I like to think so, sir." "Practical skill. Good. Too many women these days with their heads full of nonsense and no ability to actually do anything useful." He turned to Yates. "She will do. You could do a lot worse." It was hardly a romantic endorsement, but Lydia found herself charmed anyway. Mr. Young reminded her of her own father in some ways, that rough exterior covering genuine warmth. As October turned into November, the weather grew colder and the rides between ranch and town more difficult. One Saturday, Yates arrived covered in snow, having ridden through a sudden storm. "You should have stayed home," Lydia scolded, helping him brush snow from his coat. "It is not safe to ride in this weather." "I promised I would be here. I keep my promises." Yates pulled her close, his cold hands cupping her face. "Besides, I could not go a whole week without seeing you." They had been courting for 3 months now, and the relationship had deepened from those first tentative steps into something solid and real. Lydia could no longer imagine her life without Yates in it. When they were apart, she felt incomplete. When they were together, everything made sense. "I love you," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. They had not said it yet, dancing around the declaration even as it became increasingly obvious. "I am in love with you, Yates Young, and I do not care if it is too soon or improper to say so." "Thank God." Yates pulled her fully into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "I love you too. I have loved you since you stood in that doorway covered in ash and told those cowboys you could help. Maybe even before that, in some way I cannot explain." He kissed her then, his lips cold from the ride but warming quickly against hers. It was Lydia's first real kiss, and it was everything she had dreamed of and more. Sweet and tender and full of promise, when they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," Lydia's heart stuttered. "What? Marry me, Lydia." "I know we plan to court longer, be practical about this, but I do not want to be practical anymore. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a life with you. Say yes. Please say yes." "What about the ranch? My business? We have not figured out how to combine our lives." "We will figure it out. You can keep making soap. We have a building on the ranch that is not being used. You could set up there. Or keep your workshop here and come to town to work. Or I will move to Butte if that is what you need. I do not care about the details, Lydia. I just care about being with you." Lydia pulled back enough to see his face clearly. His gray eyes were fierce with emotion, completely focused on her. This man, this good and honest man, wanted to marry her, wanted to build a life with her, wanted her exactly as she was. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes, I will marry you." Yates shouted in triumph and swung her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her again, and Lydia felt like she was flying. She was engaged. She was going to marry Yates Young. They spent the rest of that day making plans. They would marry in early spring, giving them time to prepare and for Yates to add a room onto the ranch house. Lydia would keep her property in Butte and set up a smaller workshop at the ranch. She could make soap at both locations, maximizing her production. Sarah could help run the town location when Lydia was not there, since Sarah had expressed interest in learning the craft. "It will work," Yates kept saying, as if trying to convince himself as much as her. "We will make it work because we want it to. Yes, we will." Lydia felt a peace settle over her. This was right. They were right together. Word of their engagement spread through Butte faster than wildfire. By Monday, everyone in town seemed to know. People stopped Lydia on the street to offer congratulations. Women who had previously looked down on her unmarried state now smiled and chatted as if they had always been friends. Mrs. Patterson hugged her so hard Lydia could barely breathe. "I knew it," the old woman crowed. "I saw it that night at Sarah's house. You two are perfect for each other." Even Dr. Morrison offered his approval when he stopped by to purchase soap. "Young is a good man. He will treat you well, and you will be good for him too. Balance out that work ethic of his, make sure he remembers to actually live life." The winter months passed in a blur of preparation. Lydia sewed her wedding dress with Sarah's help, choosing a simple but elegant design in cream-colored fabric. She taught Sarah the soap-making process, pleased to find her friend had a real aptitude for the work. Yates expanded the ranch house, adding not just a room but an entire wing with a proper bedroom, sitting room, and indoor kitchen, a luxury few ranch houses boasted. They saw each other less frequently during the harsh winter months when travel was dangerous, but Yates still made it to town whenever the weather permitted. On those weekends when he could not come, Lydia felt his absence keenly. But absence, as the saying went, made the heart grow fonder. Each reunion was sweeter for the separation. In March, as the snows began to melt and the first signs of spring appeared, Lydia made her final preparations. She would keep her house in Butte, renting it to a young family who needed affordable housing. Her workshop would remain operational with Sarah managing it 3 days a week. The other days, Lydia would work from the ranch, where Yates had converted an old storage building into a beautiful workspace with good light and proper ventilation. The wedding was set for the first Saturday in April. They would marry in the small church in Butte, followed by a reception at Sarah's boarding house. It would not be fancy, but it would be theirs. On the Thursday before the wedding, Lydia was in her workshop making a final batch of soap to donate to the sick families when a young boy came running up. Tommy Henderson, eldest son of the family she had been helping since before she met Yates. Miss Turner," Tommy was breathless, his face flushed. "Ma sent me to fetch you. The baby is sick, real sick. Ma is scared." Lydia did not hesitate. She grabbed her bag of supplies and followed Tommy at a run. The Henderson house was on the poor side of town, a small cabin that housed 2 adults and 5 children in cramped conditions. Mrs. Henderson was pacing the floor with the baby, a 6-month-old girl in her arms. The infant was burning with fever and gasping for breath. "Oh, Miss Turner, thank God," Mrs. Henderson was crying. "She just got worse so fast. This morning she was fine and now look at her." Lydia examined the baby quickly, her heart sinking. She had seen this before. Croup or possibly pneumonia, both deadly in infants. "We need Dr. Morrison." "Tommy, run and fetch him. Tell him it is urgent." While they waited for the doctor, Lydia did what she could. She created a steam tent over a pot of boiling water, holding the baby in the moist air to ease her breathing. She sponged the tiny body with cool water to fight the fever. Mrs. Henderson hovered anxiously, wringing her hands. "Will she die? Please tell me she will not die." "Dr. Morrison will do everything possible," Lydia promised, though she could make no guarantees. Infant mortality was terrifyingly high on the frontier. She had seen too many small graves in the cemetery. The doctor arrived quickly and took over the baby's care. After a thorough examination, he pulled Lydia aside. "It is pneumonia. She is very weak. Honestly, her chances are not good." "What can we do?" "Keep her breathing moist air. Try to get fluids in her. Keep the fever down and pray." Dr. Morrison looked tired. "You have done all the right things, Lydia. Sometimes that is not enough." Lydia stayed with the Henderson family through that night and into the next day, Friday. Her wedding was tomorrow, but that seemed distant and unimportant compared to this tiny life hanging in the balance. She sent word to Yates through a neighbor boy, explaining why she could not meet him as planned. His return message was brief but supportive. "Do what you need to do. I understand. I love you." The baby's condition worsened through Friday night. Dr. Morrison came and went, each time looking more grim. By Friday evening, he took Lydia aside again. "You should go home. Get some rest before your wedding. There is nothing more you can do here. I cannot leave her. Mrs. Henderson is her mother. She can sit with her. You have done enough, more than enough." But Lydia could not make herself leave. She had cared for this family since before the baby was born. She had brought Mrs. Henderson soap and clean bandages after the birth. She had helped with the other children during that first exhausting month. This family felt like hers, and she could not abandon them now. Sometime after midnight, the baby's fever finally broke. Her breathing eased. Color returned to her tiny face. Dr. Morrison, who had been dozing in a chair, woke and examined her with gentle hands. "She is going to make it," he said wonderingly. "By God, I think she is going to make it." Mrs. Henderson burst into tears, clutching her baby close. Lydia felt her own tears flowing, relief washing over her in waves. They had done it. Against the odds, they had saved this precious life. It was nearly dawn when Lydia finally stumbled home, exhausted beyond measure. Sarah was waiting on her porch, dressed for the wedding. "You need to sleep," Sarah said firmly. "I will wake you at noon. That gives you 4 hours. The wedding is at 2. Then you will get ready very fast." "Sleep, Lydia. You are dead on your feet." Lydia was too tired to argue. She fell into bed fully dressed and was asleep within seconds. True to her word, Sarah woke her at noon. Lydia woke disoriented, her body aching from 2 days without proper rest. Then memory returned. The baby. The wedding. Her wedding. Today she was marrying Yates. Energy flooded back. She washed quickly in the cold water Sarah had ready, then submitted to her friend's ministrations. Sarah brushed out her hair and pinned it up in an elaborate style, weaving in small white flowers. She helped Lydia into the wedding dress they had worked on for months. When Lydia looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Despite the exhaustion, she glowed. "You are a beautiful bride," Sarah said, tears in her eyes. "Yates is a lucky man. I am the lucky one." They arrived at the church just minutes before 2. Lydia had no family to walk her down the aisle, so Dr. Morrison had agreed to do the honor. He stood waiting at the church door, looking dapper in his Sunday best. "You saved that baby," he said quietly. "That family will tell the story for generations. We saved her, you and me together. No, my dear, I did what any doctor would do. You did more. You sat with them, gave them hope, refused to leave even when I told you to go. That kind of caring cannot be taught." He offered his arm. Ready to get married. The church was packed. It seemed like all of but had turned out for the wedding. Lydia saw familiar faces everywhere, people she had helped and people who had helped her. The Henderson family sat in the back, Mrs. Henderson holding her now healthy baby. The woman caught Lydia's eye and mouthed, "Thank you," tears streaming down her face. Then Lydia looked toward the front and saw Yates. He stood at the altar with the preacher, wearing a new suit that made him look impossibly handsome. But it was his face that captured her attention. The love shining in his eyes, the joy in his smile, the way his whole being seemed to light up when he saw her. This was right. This was meant to be. Everything she had been through, every hardship and loss had led her to this moment, to this man. The ceremony passed in a blur. Lydia heard herself making vows, felt Yates slide a simple gold band onto her finger. She said, "I do," and heard him echo the words. Then the preacher was pronouncing them man and wife, and Yates was kissing her as the congregation applauded. They walked back down the aisle together, husband and wife. Lydia felt like she was floating. Yates squeezed her hand and whispered, "I love you, Mrs. Young. I love you too." The reception at Sarah's boarding house was lively and joyful. People had brought food and gifts, overwhelming Lydia with their generosity. Mrs. Patterson gave them a beautiful quilt she had made. The Hendersons brought vegetables from their garden, all they could afford but given with such gratitude. Even Yates's father had made the trip to town, presenting them with a deed to 20 acres of ranch land. "For you to build on someday," Mr. Young said gruffly, "when you are ready to expand." As the evening wore on and the party showed no signs of slowing, Yates whispered in Lydia's ear, "Ready to go home. Home." The word had never sounded sweeter. They said their goodbyes and loaded into the wagon Yates had brought, packed with Lydia's belongings. As they left Butt behind and headed into the darkening countryside, Lydia leaned against her husband's shoulder. "Are you happy?" Yates asked. "Happier than I ever thought possible." The ranch house was dark when they arrived, Mr. Young having stayed in town for the night to give them privacy. Yates lit lamps while Lydia explored the addition he had built. It was beautiful, clearly made with love. The bedroom had a large window facing east to catch the morning sun. The kitchen had a real stove and plenty of counter space. There were thoughtful touches everywhere, little signs that Yates had been imagining their life together while he worked. That night, in the bed Yates had built with his own hands, they came together as husband and wife. It was tender and sweet and a little awkward, as first times often are. But it was perfect because it was theirs, the beginning of a lifetime of intimacy and love. The next morning, Lydia woke to sunlight streaming through the window and Yates's arms around her. For a moment, she just lay there, savoring the feeling. She was married. She had a partner, a true partner who valued her work and supported her dreams. "Good morning, wife," Yates murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning, husband." They spent that first day together exploring their new combined life. Yates showed Lydia around the ranch, introducing her to the horses and explaining the daily operations. She saw where he had set up her soap-making workshop, already stocked with supplies he had quietly purchased. They made plans for the future, dreaming out loud about expanding both the ranch and the soap business. The weeks that followed established new rhythms. Lydia split her time between the ranch and Butt, making soap in both locations and continuing her donations to struggling families. Yates worked the ranch but made sure to stop by Lydia's workshop several times a day, just to see her, to steal a kiss, to remind himself that this wonderful reality was not a dream. They learned the small intimacies of married life, how Yates liked his coffee black and strong, how Lydia talked to herself while working, the way they fit together at night, her back against his chest, his arm around her waist. They had disagreements, of course, but they worked through them with respect and love, learning to compromise. In May, Lydia realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but wanted to be sure before telling Yates. When she finally shared the news, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy, then immediately set her down gently as if afraid he had hurt her. "We are having a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Lydia asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy, I am ecstatic, terrified but ecstatic." He cupped her face in his hands. "You are going to be an amazing mother, and you will be an amazing father." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Lydia continued working, though Yates became increasingly protective, trying to convince her to rest more. She ignored his fussing for the most part, knowing her body's limits. In January of 1875, nearly 2 years after she had first nursed a sick cowboy back to health, Lydia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him James, after Lydia's father. He had Yates's dark hair and Lydia's green eyes, and from the moment they placed him in Yates's arms, The big rancher was completely smitten. Watching her strong, capable husband turn to mush over a tiny infant made Lydia fall in love with him all over again. Life settled into a new rhythm with a baby in the house. They took turns with night feedings. Yates would often come in from working to find Lydia nursing James in the rocking chair he had made, and he would just stand and watch them with such love in his eyes that Lydia felt her heart might burst. The soap business continued to thrive. Sarah had proven so capable that Lydia made her a partner, splitting the butt workshop profits. This allowed Lydia to spend more time at the ranch while still maintaining her charitable donations. The families she had helped spread word about her soap, and demand grew. Soon they were selling not just in Butt but to mercantiles in other towns. What had started as one woman's small operation was growing into a real business. When James was 6 months old, Lydia discovered she was pregnant again, this time a girl born in 1876. They named her Ruth after Yates's mother. She had her mother's blonde hair and her father's gray eyes, a perfect blend of both parents. The years passed in a blur of joy and hard work. The ranch prospered under Yates's management, and when his father died peacefully in his sleep in 1878, Yates inherited it all. He proved to be a fair and successful rancher, respected by his workers and peers. Lydia's soap business expanded beyond anything she had imagined. By 1880, she employed 5 women in Butt and 3 more at the ranch. She still made regular donations to struggling families, but now she could do so on a much larger scale. The Lydia Young Foundation, as people began calling it, provided soap and other necessities to the sick and poor throughout Montana. In 1881, their 3rd child was born, another boy they named Thomas after the cowboy who had first brought Yates to Lydia's door. They had tracked down the old cowboy and invited him to the christening, and he had cried like a baby while holding his namesake. Life was not without challenges. They weathered harsh winters and dry summers, disease outbreaks and economic downturns. But they faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing year. Yates never failed to appreciate Lydia's strength and independence, and she never took for granted his steady support and devotion. On their 10th wedding anniversary in April of 1885, they sat on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching their 3 children play in the yard. James was 9 now, tall and serious like his father. Ruth was 8, full of curiosity and questions. Little Thomas was 4, a bundle of energy that kept them all on their toes. "You ever think about how we met?" Yates asked, his arm around Lydia's shoulders. "All the time. I think about the scared woman I was, nursing a stranger in her back room, having no idea that stranger would become her whole world. I knew, even then. Somewhere deep down, I knew you were special." Yates pressed a kiss to her temple. "Best decision I ever made, getting sick," Lydia laughed. "That is a terrible thing to say, but true. If I had not gotten pneumonia, if those cowboys had not brought me to you, I might never have met you. I might have gone my whole life not knowing what I was missing. We would have met somehow. I truly believe that. We were meant to find each other." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the Montana hills they both loved. This was their life, built together through love and work and determination. From that first moment when Lydia had opened her door to a dying cowboy, to this perfect evening surrounded by the family they had created, every step had led them here. "Thank you," Yates said quietly. "For what?" "For saying yes. For taking a chance on me. For building this life with me. For everything." Lydia turned in his arms and kissed him, pouring a decade of love into it. "Thank you for coming back, for seeing me, really seeing me, for loving me exactly as I am." "Always," Yates promised, "for the rest of our lives, and he kept that promise. They grew old together on that Montana ranch, surrounded by children and eventually grandchildren. Lydia's soap business became legendary, her charitable foundation helping thousands of people over the years. Yates built the Young Ranch into one of the most successful in the state, known not just for good cattle but for fair treatment of workers. Their children grew and thrived. James became a doctor, inspired by the stories of how his mother had helped the sick. Ruth took over the soap business, expanding it even further. Thomas became a rancher like his father, eventually inheriting the Young Ranch. In their later years, Yates and Lydia would often sit on that same porch, holding hands and watching the sunset. They would tell stories about the old days to their grandchildren, about how Grandma had saved Grandpa's life, how he had proposed in a snowstorm, how they had built something beautiful together from nothing but love and hard work. When Lydia died peacefully in her sleep at 73, surrounded by family in the house Yates had built for her, he held her hand one last time and whispered, "Thank you for a lifetime of love." He followed her 6 months later, unable to live long without his other half. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple stones that read, "Lydia Young, beloved wife, mother, and friend, to all 1850-1923 Yates Young, devoted husband, father, and rancher, 1851-1924. But their real legacy was not in those cold stones. It lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the soap business that still bore Lydia's name, in the ranch that still operated according to Yates's principles of fairness and hard work. It lived in the stories families told about the woman who had given them soap when they had nothing, who had sat with their sick children through long nights, who had shown them that kindness still existed in a hard world. And it lived most of all in the proof that love, real love, could overcome any obstacle, that a chance meeting between a soap maker and a sick cowboy could blossom into a lifetime of devotion, that two people from different worlds could build something lasting together, that sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places. In Butte, Montana, where it all began, there is still a small monument on the site of Lydia's original workshop. It reads simply, "Here began a love story that changed countless lives." May we all be so lucky to find our person and so generous in sharing our gifts. And on Saturday afternoons, when the sun hits the mountains just right and the light turns golden, locals swear you can sometimes see two figures on horseback riding together toward home. It is just a trick of the light, they say. But then again, some loves are strong enough to echo through eternity, reminding us all that the best stories never really end. They just transform, becoming part of the landscape, woven into the very fabric of a place. Yates and Lydia's love story became legend in Montana, told and retold until it was hard to separate fact from fiction. But those who had known them personally, who had witnessed their devotion firsthand, always insisted that no embellishment was needed. The truth of their love was powerful enough on its own. The Young Ranch continued to prosper through generations, each inheritor adding their own touches, but always maintaining the core values Yates and Lydia had established. The soap business evolved with the times, eventually becoming a national brand, but a portion of profits still went to the foundation that provided necessities to those in need, just as Lydia had always insisted. On the 100th anniversary of their wedding, in 1985, the family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. Great-great-grandchildren who had never met Yates and Lydia heard the stories, saw the old photographs, touched the bars of soap made according to Lydia's original recipes. They walked through the preserved workshop, saw the room where Yates had recovered from his illness, stood at the graves on the hill, and they understood, perhaps for the first time, what a gift their ancestors had given them. Not just financial security or family legacy, but proof that love and dedication could build something that lasted. That one person's decision to help a stranger could ripple forward through time, affecting hundreds of lives in ways impossible to measure. The oldest family member present that day was Mary, Lydia and Yates's granddaughter, 92 years old but still sharp as a tack. She had been 18 when Lydia died and remembered her grandmother vividly. She never stopped working, Mary told the gathered crowd. Even in her 70s, she was making soap, visiting the sick, finding ways to help. And Grandpa Yates, he never stopped looking at her like she hung the moon. I remember one time, I must have been 10 or 11, I asked him how they stayed so in love after so many years. You know what he told me? The crowd leaned in, eager to hear. He said, "Mary, your grandmother saved my life that first week, but she has continued saving it every day since. She makes me want to be better, do more, love harder. How could I not adore her? That was the kind of love they had. The kind that made each other better." As the celebration continued, with music and dancing and shared meals, the spirit of Yates and Lydia seemed to hover over it all. Their love had created not just a family but a community, a network of people connected by shared values of hard work, generosity, and devotion. And so the story that began with a soap maker donating bars to the sick, and a cowboy returning with a wedding proposal, continued on. It lived in every act of kindness, every gesture of love, every moment when someone chose compassion over convenience. It reminded everyone who heard it that the most profound changes often begin with simple acts of human decency. Yates and Lydia Young had loved each other deeply and lived that love loudly, transforming not just their own lives but the lives of countless others. And in the end, what more could anyone ask than to love well and be well loved in return, to build something meaningful and lasting, to leave the world better than they found it? Their story was complete, a perfect circle from that first desperate moment when sick Cowboy met determined soapmaker, to the final peaceful moments of lives well lived. Everything that mattered had been said, done, and proven. They had loved, created, persevered, and triumphed. And their legacy would continue, passed down through generations, a testament to the enduring power of love, commitment, and unwavering devotion to both each other, and to making their corner of the world a better place. The end.